Shalom. Peace and welcome to the Ministry of the Real Truth. Today's lesson is about becoming aware when it comes to biblical scripture. As we have come across many people preaching and teaching things like the spiritual milk of babes and the meat of the more mature and spiritual literal physical foods because they see and read certain verses in Genesis speaking of live animals and their byproduct and being used as sacrifices when acquired by God. These people don't like to be corrected and will fight you tooth and nail trying to prove that what they claim is true when it isn't. There are other people who make claims that the real names or titles of God are Yahu, Washi, Yahuwah, and often try to merge an Aramaic name with the Hebrew name Anusi, Ashur, Yeshua, and many other so-claimed Hebrew names or titles. When we confronted a professor with 2 doctorates or PhDs in the ancient Aramaic, Hebrew, and Greek languages on this, he exclaimed, "What the hell is that? It is not Hebrew or in the Hebrew language." They often quote their sources as the King James Version, the Septuagint, the Masoret texts, the Textus Receptus, and even the Aramaic Peshitta. There are many who claim that their particular version of the Bible is the authentic preserved version preserved by God Himself, that they have the version which has no errors, mistakes, or contradictions. Yet today's top theologians have proven time and time again that there are errors, mistakes, or contradictions in many of these versions. One really needs to spend a lot of hours in personal research, study, and the history of the scriptures to know exactly what you are reading and talking about. You really need to know the history and establish the facts as fact and the evidence as evident. Realize this fact. Originally the scriptures were written down by Eastern scribes born, raised, and educated in the Eastern languages, culture, traditions, rituals via an Eastern education. So they have an Eastern mindset, an Eastern way of thought and expressing themselves. We in the West are born, raised, and educated to use a Western education system and a Western mindset as a result from that. Today's modern theologians are trying to merge Eastern thought with Western thought. This can be compared to mixing oil with water. It won't gel. Before the episode of the Tower of Babel, there was a righteous man named Ashur who foresaw the danger and fled from the area to build the cities of Nineveh, Rehoboth, and Calah. Having abandoned the region before the building of the Tower of Babel, Ashur was excluded from punishment and retained the original holy language and its script. Thus, it became known as Ashuri. Over the next millennium, the holy script of Ashuri deteriorated and became mixed with the script of the indigenous peoples who wrote in Paleo-Hebrew. Paleo-Hebrew by Chaim Cloth in Rediscovering a Lost Jewish Script. There is one Hebrew language, but it has 2 different scripts. One of these scripts fell into complete disuse and was forgotten 2,000 years ago. Within the past century, it has been rediscovered. The impact of this discovery has not yet been fully felt, for the lost script may well be the original, the one in which the 10 Commandments were written by the finger of God, and the one in which Moses wrote the original Torah. The lost script is called Ivri or Paleo-Hebrew. The lost script is called Ivri or Paleo-Hebrew. Our familiar Hebrew script is known as Ashuri or Assyrian script. Paleo-Hebrew was completely abandoned around the time of the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70 CE, except for the inscriptions on a few ancient Jewish coins. No remnant of Paleo-Hebrew remained. The Babylonian Talmud, Sanhedrin 21b, has a pertinent discussion about these 2 forms of Hebrew writing. March Sutra 3, or some say, March Akbar said, originally the Torah was given to Israel in Ivri, Paleo-Hebrew, letters and in the sacred Hebrew language. Shalom. Peace and welcome to the Ministry of the Real Truth. Today's lesson is about becoming aware when it comes to biblical scripture. As we have come across many people preaching and teaching things like the spiritual milk of babes and the meat of the more mature and spiritual literal physical foods because they see and read certain verses in Genesis speaking of live animals and their byproduct and being used as sacrifices when acquired by God. These people don't like to be corrected and will fight you tooth and nail trying to prove that what they claim is true when it isn't.